The NFL just one contract got announced, 10 NFL stars drew a line in the sand and dared their teams to cross it. And the reason? One young man in Houston just changed the entire game. Sit down, because this story is not just about money. This is about loyalty. This is about sacrifice. This is about players who gave everything they had to their teams and then watched the clock tick year after year while the league moved on without them. This is about the moment when enough becomes enough, and what happens when 10 stars decide to pull the pin at the exact same time. This is one of the wildest domino effects in NFL history. And it started with one contract. Let's go back to the beginning. Will Anderson Jr. was not supposed to be this good this fast. Alabama, people knew he was talented. You don't get drafted second overall by accident. But talented and dominant are two very different things in this league, and a lot of second overall picks have faded into the background noise of NFL history. Will Anderson did not fade. Will Anderson exploded. In his first 2 seasons, this young man transformed the Houston defense into something opposing offenses had nightmares about. He was everywhere, coming off the edge into a legitimate threat. He became the cornerstone of a franchise that had been searching for an identity for years. And then came contract time. The Texans and Will Anderson sat down and they worked it out. And when that deal got announced, the NFL community stopped what it was doing and stared at the screen. The numbers were massive. We are talking about a deal that put Will Anderson among the highest paid defensive players in the history of professional football. A deal that was not just fair, it was a statement. It told the world that Houston believed in this young man so completely that they were willing to lock him in and build their entire future around him. That is when the phones started ringing across the league. Because 10 other players, 10 veterans, 10 stars, 10 men who had been waiting, looked at that number and did the math. And what the math told them was not pretty. It told them they were underpaid. Dramatically underpaid. Some of them had been underpaid for years. Some of them had restructured deals to help their teams under the salary cap, taking less money now with the promise of future security. Some of them had turned down bigger offers from other teams out of loyalty. And now here they were, watching a player younger than them, with less experience than them, get a deal that made their current contracts look like they were written in a different era. So they picked up the phone. They called their agents. And their agents called the teams. And the message was the same across the board. We want out. Or we want a new deal. And if we can't get a new deal, then we want out. 10 players. 10 teams. 10 ticking time bombs. Let's talk about who these players are. Because this is not a list of backups and practice squad guys trying to make noise. This is a list of names that make defenses game plan for weeks. Names that sell jerseys. Names that fill stadiums. And every single one of them looked at what Will Anderson just got and felt something they had been pushing down for a long time finally rise to the surface. The first thing you have to understand about the NFL is that players have always been in a complicated relationship with their teams. Unlike basketball, NFL contracts are not guaranteed the way fans think they are. You can have 5 years and $100 million on paper, and if the team decides to cut you tomorrow, they owe you a fraction of what you thought you had secured. Players know this. They live with it every day. They sign these deals understanding that the team can walk away at any moment, but the player is supposed to stay loyal. The player is supposed to show up, work hard, and trust the process. For a long time, most players did exactly that. But the league has been changing. Salaries have been exploding. The salary cap has been climbing every single year. And as the money gets bigger, the gap between what teams are willing to pay and what players believe they deserve has been getting wider and wider. Will Anderson's deal did not just open that gap further. It ripped it wide open. Let's talk about the first wave of players who made noise after that deal dropped. Among the group demanding attention are pass rushers, cornerbacks, a linebacker or two, and a couple of offensive weapons who have been carrying their teams on their backs. These are players at different stages of their careers, some young and ready to chase their first big deal, some veterans who feel the window closing and know that this might be their last real chance to get what they deserve. One of them restructured his contract 2 years ago. He took less money. He moved things around so his team could sign other players and stay competitive. He did it without complaint, without drama, without leaking anything to the media. He was the good soldier. And now he is watching a player get a deal that is $100 million more than what he restructured down to, and he is sitting across from his team in contract talks that are going nowhere. Another one has played through injuries that would have ended the careers of lesser men. He played through a season where he was probably 50% healthy because his team needed him and he did not want to let them down. His team remembers that now, but remembering and paying are two very different things. There is a corner on this list who has been one of the best in the league for 3 straight seasons and whose contract puts him outside the top 10 at his position in terms of salary. He has been patient. He has been professional. He has said all the right things in every press conference. But patience has a breaking point, and Will Anderson's deal just found his. And here is what makes this story even more fascinating. These players are not just upset. They are strategic. They are coordinated, not officially, because the league has rules about that, but they have been talking. Their agents have been talking. And the timing of these demands, all hitting within hours of each other, is not an accident. This is a movement. Now let's step into the shoes of the teams for a moment. Because they are not sitting there twisting their villainous mustaches and laughing about underpaying their stars. The salary cap is real. The rules are real. And for every team, the math of building a roster is a constant puzzle that never fully solves itself. When a team signs a Will Anderson to a massive deal, they are also making a choice about every other player on their roster. The cap is a pie. When you give one player a bigger slice, everybody else's slice gets smaller. Teams have to make impossible decisions every single off-season. Who do we keep? Who do we let go? Who do we restructure? Who do we draft to replace the star we can no longer afford? So when 10 players demand to be released or demand new contracts, the teams are not just facing a PR problem. They are facing a mathematical crisis. If you give all 10 of them what they want, you might not be able to afford your offensive line. You might have to cut depth that you need to survive the season. You might win the negotiation and lose the team. But here is the other side of that coin. If you don't give them what they want, what happens? You lose them. And you don't just lose their production. You lose the culture they built. You lose the leadership in the locker room. You lose the face of the franchise that fans have been buying jerseys for. And you probably lose their replacement too, because free agency is about to get very interesting. This is the impossible position the NFL just found itself in. And it is going to get messier before it gets cleaner. Let's slow down for a second and really feel the human side of this. Think about what it actually means to be an NFL player demanding to be released. You have been part of a team. A family, really. These are the people you practice with every day. The guys you sit next to on plane rides. The people whose kids know your name and whose wives have become friends with your family. The locker room is not just a workplace, it is a community. And when you say I want out, you are not just walking away from a contract. You are walking away from relationships. You are potentially burning bridges with coaches who believed in you, with teammates who leaned on you, with a fan base that chanted your name. That is not an easy thing to do. Even when the money is wrong. Even when you feel disrespected. Even when the math is clearly not in your favor. These 10 players made that decision anyway. And that tells you something about how serious this is. This was not a spur-of-the-moment reaction. You do not look your organization in the eye and say release me without thinking about it for a long time. Without talking to your family. Without losing sleep over it. Without sitting in the quiet of your home and asking yourself whether you are making the right call. They decided the answer was yes. All 10 of them. And now the clock is ticking. Here is where it gets really interesting from a football perspective. If even half of these players actually hit the open market, if the teams blink and release them rather than negotiate, the free agency landscape changes overnight. Completely. We are talking about a wave of talent flooding the market that would normally be distributed across years of transactions, all arriving at the same moment. Defensive players who can rush the passer are the most valuable commodity in today's NFL. The game has evolved into a quarterback-driven league, and the only real counter to an elite quarterback is a pass rusher who can get to him before he can function. When Will Anderson's deal set the market, it also told every team in the league what the going rate is. And now imagine multiple elite pass rushers on the market at the same time. The bidding war that would follow would be unprecedented. Teams that have been hunting for an edge rusher for years would be throwing every available cap dollar at this group. Teams that thought they could not afford a player like this might suddenly find themselves in the running, restructuring deals, cutting veterans, doing whatever it takes to bring one of these names home. It would reshape the conference power balance. Playoff contenders could become pretenders. Teams that were rebuilding could accelerate their timelines by a decade. A good front office could turn this moment of chaos into a dynasty-building opportunity. A bad one could overcommit, blow up their cap, and spend 5 years recovering. The ripple effects are not just about this season. This could define the next half-decade of the NFL. Let's talk about Will Anderson's role in all of this. Because this young man did not ask to be the trigger. He did not orchestrate this. He simply got what he was worth. He simply had a team that believed in him enough to pay him accordingly. And now he is at the center of a story that is bigger than him. But here is what's beautiful about it, in a way. Will Anderson coming into the league, being great, and then being rewarded for being great, that is exactly how the system is supposed to work. That is what every young player dreams about when they are in high school, running routes in the summer heat or doing drills at 5 in the morning before anyone else is awake. You work hard. You become great. You get paid. The problem is the system does not always work that cleanly. And the 10 players who are making noise right now are proof of that. They worked hard. They became great. And somewhere along the way, the system did not give them what they earned. Will Anderson's deal did not create their frustration. It just gave it a number. Now let's walk through what each side is probably thinking right now behind closed doors. The players and their agents are thinking about leverage. In any negotiation, leverage is everything. And right now, these 10 players have more leverage than they have probably ever had, because the market just got reset by one deal and the whole league is watching to see what happens next. If one of them caves and accepts a bad deal, they all lose leverage. If they hold the line together, even informally, they keep the pressure on. The teams are thinking about public relations as much as they are thinking about cap math. Nobody wants to be the organization that let a beloved star walk because they were too stubborn to give him a fair deal. Fans notice. Draft recruits notice. Free agents notice. The reputation of how you treat your players follows you for years. Teams that are stingy in negotiations find themselves on the outside looking in when big free agents are making their decisions. The league office is probably watching all of this very, very carefully. Because if 10 high-profile players demanding releases becomes 20, and 20 becomes a trend, the labor dynamics of the entire sport shift. The next collective bargaining agreement negotiation becomes much more complex. The relationship between players and ownership takes on a new texture. And the media, the reporters, the analysts, the podcasters, they are feasting. This is exactly the kind of story that drives clicks and views and debates. Every sports show in the country is going to spend the next 2 weeks dissecting this list, debating who has the strongest case, predicting which teams will fold first, speculating about where these players might land. The story has legs. Long ones. Let's talk about the veterans on this list specifically. Because there is a different kind of heartbreak in their story. When you have been in the league for 8, 9, 10 years, you have seen everything. You have seen players come and go. You have seen dynasties rise and crumble. You have watched teammates get hurt and never come back. You have sat in the locker room after playoff losses that haunted you for months. You have also been there for the wins, the ones where everything clicks and for one afternoon or one night, all the sacrifice feels worth it. Veteran players know the game is not going to last forever. Their bodies tell them that every morning when they wake up and feel the accumulated weight of every hit they have ever taken. They know the window is closing. And when the window is closing and you still have not gotten a deal that reflects what you have contributed, that is a kind of urgency that younger players do not fully feel yet. For a 22-year-old star, a bad contract is frustrating. It can be corrected. There is time. For a 31-year-old star, a bad contract might be the last one. This might be the last chance to secure the financial foundation that protects your family for generations. To walk away from this league, this brutal, beautiful, consuming league, with something to show for everything you gave it. The veterans on this list are not just fighting for money. They are fighting for the last chapter of their story. And Will Anderson's deal, a deal for a young player with most of his career still ahead of him, reminded them exactly how little time they have left. Here is a storyline within the story that not enough people are talking about. Some of the players on this list are on teams that are genuine Super Bowl contenders right now. Their departures would not just be a roster setback, they would be a season-ending catastrophe. We are not talking about teams that are rebuilding and can absorb the loss. We are talking about franchises that are this close, right now, to making a real run at the championship. Imagine being in the war room of one of those teams. You have spent years building this roster. You have made the trades, signed the free agents, drafted the right players, developed them, created the culture. You are standing on the edge of something special. And now one of the foundational pieces of what you built is standing in your office telling you that if you do not figure something out, he is walking out the door. That conversation has happened this week. Multiple times. In multiple cities. And the general managers and team owners sitting across from those players are doing the calculation in real time. Do we pay him and potentially sacrifice something else we need, or do we stand firm and risk watching our championship window slam shut? There is no clean answer. There is no version of this where everybody wins. Somebody is going to have to give something up. The question is who blinks first and how much it costs them. Let's zoom out for a second and put this in historical context. Because this is not the first time a single contract reset the market and caused a wave of discontent. It has happened before, in football, in basketball, in baseball. It is one of the most consistent patterns in professional sports. When one player breaks through a financial ceiling, everybody below that ceiling suddenly looks up and sees the space above them. The players who thought their deals were reasonable suddenly realize the benchmark has moved. And the closer you are to that benchmark, the more talented, the more accomplished, the more decorated, the stronger your case becomes. The NFL has seen this pattern accelerate in recent years because the salary cap has been climbing faster than most contracts could keep up with. A deal that seemed generous 3 years ago can look modest today because the cap has grown significantly. Players who signed long-term extensions to give their team certainty sometimes find themselves locked into money that the market has passed by before the ink is even dry. Will Anderson's deal is not just a big number. It is a signal about where the market is heading. And for 10 players whose contracts were written in a different moment, that signal sounds like an alarm clock they cannot ignore. Something else is happening underneath all of this that is worth slowing down and really sitting with. The conversation around player empowerment in the NFL has been building for years. In basketball, superstars have mastered the art of controlling their destiny, demanding trades, choosing their teams, building their own brands independent of any franchise. The NBA player has more power today than at almost any point in the sport's history. The NFL has been slower to get there, partly because of the nature of the contracts, partly because of the way the league is structured, partly because football is the ultimate team sport, and the narrative of sacrifice for the team has always been deeply embedded in the culture. But the wall has been cracking. Players have been getting more comfortable asserting their value. Agents have been getting more sophisticated. The public, the fans, the media, have become more sympathetic to player demands in a way that was not always true a generation ago. What is happening right now, with these 10 players, might be one of the clearest signs yet that the NFL is moving into a new era. An era where the star player has more leverage, more voice, and more willingness to use both. If these 10 players win, if they get their deals or get released and land bigger money on the open market, it will send a message that echoes for a decade. It will tell every star player in the league that you do not have to sit quietly and wait. You can demand what you are worth. You can use the market as your leverage. You can point to the contract on the other side of the league and say that is the number, and I'm not moving until we get there. That is a paradigm shift. And it might be starting right now. Let's talk about the agents in this story. Because they are the architects of what is happening, and they almost never get the attention they deserve. When Will Anderson's deal was finalized, every agent representing a top defensive player in the NFL immediately got to work. They pulled up the numbers. They ran the comparisons. They built the arguments. And then they started making calls. The agent's job is to maximize value for their client. That is the entire job. And the way you maximize value is by creating urgency, creating competition, and creating the perception that your client has options, real options, not theoretical ones. When an agent calls a team and says my client is considering requesting a release, that is not just a negotiating tactic. That is a loaded gun on the table. The team has to decide immediately whether to take it seriously or call the bluff. And in a world where Will Anderson's deal just reset the market and 10 other players are having the same conversation with their teams at the same time, calling the bluff has real consequences. Because what if it is not a bluff? What if one of these players actually walks? What if the team holds firm and the player requests the release and the story becomes the headline that defines your franchise for the next 2 years? What if your quarterback's best year gets wasted because you were too stubborn to give a cornerback an extra $5 million a year? The agents know these are the questions keeping the general managers up at night. And they are pressing every single pressure point they can find. This is the invisible war happening right now, in offices and on phone calls and in text threads, while the public watches from the outside and waits for the first domino to fall. Here is the part of the story that nobody is really saying out loud yet. The part that lives between the lines. Some of these players are going to get paid. They are too good, too important, too visible for their teams to let them walk. The negotiations are going to get uncomfortable and the timeline is going to get tight, but at the end of it, there will be a handshake and a new number and a press release about how much the organization values this player and how excited everyone is about the future. That will happen. Probably for 5 or 6 of them. But not all 10. Some of these players are going to be released. Not because their teams do not value them, but because the math truly does not work. Because the cap is what it is and the other commitments are what they are, and no amount of creativity in the front office can make the numbers add up to what the player needs them to add up to. And when those players hit the open market, the rest of the league is going to run toward them like it is a fire sale at the most exclusive store in the world. That is where it gets unpredictable. Because a player who becomes available unexpectedly, at a position of premium value, can land somewhere that changes the entire power structure of the league. A Super Bowl contender that was missing one piece suddenly finds that piece. A team that has been just outside the playoff picture for 3 years gets the upgrade that pushes them over the edge. The NFL is always best when it is unpredictable. And right now, it has never been more unpredictable. Let me take you back to Will Anderson for a moment. Because I think his story deserves more than just being the trigger for everything else. Will Anderson grew up watching this league. He dreamed about playing in it the way every kid who has ever put on a helmet dreams about it. He went to Alabama and became one of the most decorated college defenders in recent memory. He got drafted 2nd overall and walked into a Houston Texans facility that was in the middle of its own transformation, finding its identity, building something. And he did not just show up and collect a paycheck. He worked. He studied. He led. He became the player that young defensive linemen across the country watch on film to understand how the position is supposed to be played. He earned that contract. Completely and totally earned it. And now his success, the success he built with his own hands and his own sacrifice, is reshaping the entire salary structure of the most popular sports league in the world. There is something beautiful about that, even in the middle of all the chaos. A young man from a smaller story becoming so good at his craft that the ripples from his success touch every corner of the league he plays in. That is what greatness does. It changes things. Not just for the person who achieves it, but for everybody around them. Now let's get into the individual situations, because each one of these players has a story that is worth understanding on its own terms. Think about the pass rusher who has been in the league for 7 years and has only made 1 Pro Bowl, but anyone who watches the tape knows he is one of the most disruptive players in the conference. His production numbers have been solid but not spectacular, partly because teams have been scheming away from him, which is actually a form of recognition, even if it does not show up in the box score. His team has been using that against him in negotiations, pointing to the numbers rather than the impact. He is tired of explaining why the numbers do not tell the whole story. Will Anderson's deal gave him the language to have a different conversation. Think about the cornerback who has been covering the other team's number 1 receiver every single week without complaint, without asking for help, without the credit he deserves. When a quarterback throws away from a corner because they do not want to test him, the stat sheet says 0 catches, 0 yards. But the game says that corner just erased a threat. He has been erasing threats for 3 years and getting paid like someone who does not. He is done explaining it politely. Think about the linebacker who restructured his deal 2 seasons ago when his team was in cap trouble. He sat down with the front office, listened to the situation, and agreed to defer money and rework the structure because he believed in what they were building. He was patient. He was a team player. He did not make it a news story. Now his team is healthy under the cap, they have signed other players, and when he comes in asking for a new deal that reflects the current market, he is being told to wait. He is not waiting anymore. Think about the young edge rusher who is only in year 2 of his rookie deal, the one that was set years ago under a draft slot that no longer reflects what he has proven he is worth. He has already outperformed the deal he signed. He is looking at a 3rd year and a 4th year of making a fraction of what the market says he should earn, and he is watching Will Anderson and doing the same math that every player in his position is doing. The stories are different. The frustrations are similar. And they are all converging at the same moment. Here is the wild card nobody is fully accounting for yet. The quarterbacks. When elite pass rushers and elite corners become available in the same window, the quarterback's life gets significantly more complicated. The offenses that have been built around certain assumptions about the defensive landscape are suddenly looking at a reshuffled deck. A quarterback who has been comfortable operating against a particular defense for years might find himself playing against a new version of that defense in the fall, one that includes a player he used to exploit, now wearing a different color jersey. The mental adjustment required is real. The film study changes. The game planning changes. And on the other side, a quarterback who has been getting hit too much, who has been under pressure too often, who has been managing the game from a compromised position, he might be about to get the help he never knew he was going to get. A premier pass rusher wearing his team's colors changes everything about how the offense on the other side of the ball has to approach the game. The quarterback ripple effect is something that will play out over a full season, and analysts are going to spend years connecting the dots. But it starts right here, right now, with 10 players and 1 contract. There is a conversation happening on social media right now that is worth acknowledging. Because the fans are not all saying the same thing, and the split is fascinating. Some fans are fully behind the players. They are saying these men put their bodies on the line, they built this product, they deserve to be paid what the market says they are worth, and any team that does not recognize that is showing its true colors about how it views its players. Other fans are frustrated. They are saying these players signed contracts, they gave their word, and if they want to be released now because someone else got paid more, that is disloyal. That the fans showed up, bought the jerseys, stayed loyal through the losing seasons, and now the stars want to leave the moment money becomes the issue. Both of those perspectives are real. Both of them contain truth. And the tension between them is one of the most interesting fault lines in modern sports culture, the line between the business and the bond. Between the contract and the community. The players are not wrong to want fair market value. The fans are not wrong to feel conflicted when a beloved player suddenly becomes a trade request or a release demand. These things can both be true at the same time. What makes it hard is that in sports, unlike most businesses, we ask the product to also be the passion. We ask the player to perform and also to inspire. To execute and also to connect. And when the business side ruptures through the surface, it disrupts the story we tell ourselves about what sports are for. That disruption is uncomfortable. And it is happening right now, in 10 cities, all at once. Let's talk about the deadline pressure building behind all of this. The NFL calendar moves fast. There are dates and windows that matter enormously: trading deadlines, roster cut-down days, the start of training camp, the pre-season schedule. As those dates approach, the urgency of these negotiations increases exponentially on both sides. A player who wants to be released but does not get released before training camp is in an awkward position. Do they show up? Do they hold out? A holdout is its own kind of statement, but it also costs the player in terms of conditioning, team chemistry, and fines. A team that is trying to negotiate has much more leverage before training camp than after, because after camp starts, you are counting on that player's presence to build the identity of the team. The next few weeks are going to be the most consequential weeks in this story. Deals will either get done or they will not. Players will either show up to camp in their current uniforms or the story will escalate into something that takes on a life of its own. Every day that passes without a resolution is a day closer to a point of no return. And both sides know that. Which is why the calls are happening now, urgently, and why the pressure inside those conference rooms is unlike anything most of these executives and players have felt before. One more thing before we start to bring this home. Think about the young players watching all of this. The rookies who just got drafted. The second and third year players on rookie deals who are developing and paying attention and taking notes. The college players who are a year or two away from entering this league. What they are watching right now is a masterclass in leverage. They are watching stars use their market value as a weapon. They are watching agents coordinate strategy across multiple clients in ways that create collective pressure without any official organization. They are watching 10 players stand up at the same time and force an industry to reckon with itself. These young players are going to remember this. When their time comes, when they are the veteran approaching a contract negotiation, when they are the star who feels undervalued, they are going to think back to this moment. To what worked. To what it looked like when players stopped asking politely and started demanding with purpose. The generation of players coming behind these 10 is going to be the most empowered group of NFL athletes in the history of the sport. And part of the reason for that is what is happening right now. This is not just a contract dispute. This is a lesson. A blueprint. A moment that future players will study the way lawyers study landmark cases. So where does this end? The honest answer is nobody knows yet. The story is still unfolding. The calls are still being made. The numbers are still being argued over in rooms that the cameras will never see. But here is what we do know. At least some of these players are going to get their deals. Because the teams have too much to lose by letting them walk. The pressure is real and the market just justified every argument these players are making. At least some of these players are going to end up somewhere new. Because some of the math will not work no matter how creative the front offices get. And when those players hit the market, things are going to get wild in a way that makes every NFL fan excited regardless of which team they root for. The league is going to adjust. It always does. New benchmarks get set, and within a few seasons, those benchmarks are the new normal. What feels like a crisis right now becomes the foundation for the next round of negotiations. And Will Anderson, young, talented, deserving Will Anderson, is going to keep playing football in Houston. He is going to keep hunting quarterbacks and disrupting offenses and being exactly the player that justified the contract they gave him. But he is going to be doing it in a league that is slightly different than it was before his deal was announced. A league where 10 players looked at what he earned and decided they deserved the same respect. A league where the ripple from one great contract turned into a wave that nobody fully saw coming. This story is not over. Not even close. We are at the beginning of something that is going to play out over the next several months and shape the NFL in ways that analysts are going to spend years unpacking. Every development, every deal signed or rejected, every player who gets released or who reports to camp despite demanding out, all of it is a piece of a larger picture that we are only starting to see. But what we can say right now, with complete confidence, is this. 5 minutes ago the story was that Will Anderson just got paid. Right now the story is that 10 players are demanding to be released in response. And tomorrow the story might be something none of us have predicted yet. Because that is what makes this league what it is. That is what makes this game worth watching, worth talking about, worth caring about. You never know what happens next. Stay close. Because this one is just getting started.